yesterday, or the day we did our lecture, we talked about some energy basics. We talked about energy security. What does it mean to be an energy secure person, to be an energy secure country, knowing that you're going to have light, you're going to have heat, you're going to be able to cook your food. And not everyone's got that. Not all countries have that. Today we're going to talk about two things. We're going to talk about non-renewable energy sources. This is still the most prevalent source of energy in the United States and in a lot of countries of the world. And we're going to talk about how does this energy source, this non-renewable energy source, turn into electricity that you can plug your phone into the wall and be able to charge that phone. Non-renewable energy is defined as energy that comes from a non-renewable source. Fossil fuels are coal, oil, natural gas, and then nuclear fuels are also non-renewable. You kind of have like a gray area with our nuclear fuels. They are non-renewable. Once all the radioactive material on the planet is gone, that's gone as an energy source. But nuclear materials last forever. So the odds that we're going to run out of it are pretty slim. Realize that every energy choice that we're going to talk about, renewable and non-renewable, have a pro and a con. And like I said the other day, the goal here is to have the pro outweigh the con. Why do we still use non-renewable energy sources? We've talked about all of the cons of non-renewable. So why are we still doing it? First and biggest reason is OPEC. OPEC is the 12 countries that control the oil trade for the most part. These are the countries that are saying how much oil is being produced, how much oil is being imported and exported, and we have trade agreements with OPEC. Which means, as a country, regardless of whether we use it, we are locked into buying it. So we are required to buy a certain amount of oil from OPEC. And so there's really no financial incentive to switch away from non-renewable resources. Why would we buy something that we're not going to use? Now, as time goes on, and as the original trade agreements start to fade away, yeah, we can do it so it's more favorable to renewable. We're not there yet. The other reason why we are still locked into non-renewable resources is because our TNCs, that's an abbreviation from like September, it's a transcontinental or transnational company. These are companies that have their business in a bunch of different countries. So it's not like your small mom and pop company. It's a company that, like Coca-Cola, produces all over the world. These companies are still using technology that is dependent on fossil fuels. And fossil fuel-based technology is cheaper than renewable energy sources. And if your business is to make money, then you're going to want to do it in the cheapest way possible, and that's non-renewable resources. Lastly, all renewable resources are location dependent, which means solar is not going to work for the majority of Canada, where they don't get sun every day of the year. Tidal is not going to work in Iowa, where there's no tides. Geothermal isn't going to work in California. We don't have pockets, well, it's not going to work in Southern California. We don't have pockets of hot water. Geothermal might work in Mammoth, though. So it really is location dependent when we talk about it. Our non-renewables are not location dependent. I can transfer our non-renewables from one country to another. A fossil fuel is a category of fuels derived from long dead things that have been compressed under high pressure. When you put gas in your car, you are putting the remnants of dinosaurs in your gas tank to make your car go. 50 million years ago, these things are long, long dead. Eventually, our cemeteries will become the new fossil fuel areas, but it's going to take millions of years to use your body as a fossil fuel. Nuclear fuels are derived from radioactive materials that give off energy as they decay. they are limited in So how do I take a lump of coal and make energy? The principle is the same no matter how I'm starting, whether it be a lump of coal, whether it be natural gas, whether it be water. The idea here is to turn a turbine, and the turning of that turbine generates electricity as it turns. Now, how do I get that turbine to turn? The most common way is to burn a fossil fuel, burn oil, burn coal, and as that's burning, I heat water. That water, as it boils then, generates steam. That steam turns the turbine, and the turbine generates electricity. So when I have a lump of coal, I'm going to burn that coal to heat the water, to create steam, to turn the turbine, to generate electricity. If I've got oil, I'm doing the same thing. If I have nuclear power, I'm doing the same thing. I'm using the heat that is given off from the nuclear reaction to boil water, to generate steam, to turn a turbine. When we talk about our renewable resources, when we talk about wind, that is spinning a propeller. That spinning of the propeller is turning a turbine, which is generating electricity. When I talk hydroelectric, water rushing through is turning a turbine, which is generating electricity. So the principle is the same no matter how we get there. The idea is to turn a turbine. Once we get that electricity, it's in the ether because we've turned that turbine. We have to then transport it to your house, and that's what the power lines are for. So this little video is going to show you from the generation of the electricity at the power plant ending. All right, a few things about those power lines. For the most part, in our area, our power lines are underground, which means you don't have a wire going from a pole to your house. If you go to the older areas of Southern California, like Long Beach, all of those homes have a power line on the street, either in front or behind their house, and then they've got a wire, essentially, that drops off that power line to their roof line and into the house. The reason why we don't do that in new construction in California is we live in a high wind area. And so all it takes is one branch to blow into that line and knock it off your house, and now you've got a $1,000 repair to reconnect it, because you can't go up and reconnect that. That has to be done by a professional. In California, in the last couple of years, we have passed a bill that says the power companies are no longer responsible for wildfires that are caused by trees knocking into their power lines in high wind areas. That was in response to the fires in Northern California that wiped an entire city off the map. They didn't want to be financially responsible. The outfall of that is twofold. One, if you live in a fire-prone area in Southern California right now, the companies that insure the houses, your homeowner insurance, is likely to drop you. So on the Nextdoor app, in the Rancho area, Dove area, people are losing their homeowner insurance left and right. Because now, if there's a fire created by SoCal Edison, one of their lines arcing, lighting the brush on fire, creating a wildfire that takes your house off the map, you can't sue SoCal Edison, which means the insurance company would have to pay for your house, and the insurance companies are going, no, we don't want to be liable. The other thing that has happened is the state has stepped in and said in high wind conditions, in fire-prone areas, the power companies need to shut the power lines down. What that means is, if you guys think about Rancho Santa Margarita, and you think about the Santa Margarita Parkway, the lake is on this side of the parkway, and there's homes on this side, right? If you live on the lake side of Santa Margarita Parkway, your power grid, your transformer, is the same one that is in the canyon. High wind, high fire prone area. Anytime we have Santa Ana's now, all of the homes on the lake side of Santa Margarita are at risk of losing power if the power company decides that it is too risky to run electricity. If you're on the other side, the Ladera side of Santa Margarita Boulevard, you still get power. 2 different power grids, 2 different fire risks. You can see the big lines, the main lines that have that 765,000 voltage electricity running through it. Those go through the creek bed, which is high fire risk. So they will shut those down in the canyon if it gets too windy. All right, that's how you are getting electricity to your house, how we're generating it. In generating electricity with fossil fuels, the fossil fuels themselves, coal being the most prevalent, is only about 35% efficient, which means if you look at the total energy that could be available in coal, when we go through this process to generate electricity, we only really harvest about 35% of it. There are a couple ways we can up the efficiency of our fossil fuel. The first one is combined cycle. This is natural gas combustion that is turning a turbine and heating water. They then use this heated water in 2 separate turbines. So they're essentially reusing the heat that they've already generated. It's going to double your efficiency. The other way we are going to utilize more of the energy that we are getting off of our coal is through cogeneration. Now we live in a weird state. We live in a state where it doesn't get very cold, and so we don't worry about heating our homes. But if you've ever been to the Midwest or East Coast, cogeneration is a very common thing. You are going to generate electricity through burning of a fossil fuel, through the boiling of water and the creation of steam. That creation of steam is going to turn a turbine and generate electricity. And then we are going to push either that steam or that hot water through cast iron pipes all throughout your building or your house. And those cast iron pipes will get hot and then spread heat through the house. So if you've ever been to an old home, England's got them. They have radiators. It's essentially about this wide, and they're usually about like this long. And it's just a bunch of spiral cast iron pipes linked together. That gets hot with this steam or this hot water, and then as those heat up, it basically spreads the heat into the room. So we are using that energy twice, essentially, for 2 different purposes. A fossil fuel provides the majority of energy for developed and underdeveloped countries. Extracted from 50 to 350 million year old organic material that has decomposed and been put under high pressure. Our first fossil fuel is the most common fossil fuel, and that's coal. When we talk about coal, coal comes from plant material. So it's plant material that has been buried, high pressure, millions of years, and it makes this rock, this black lump, that we are then going to burn. Coal is still the most used because it is the most plentiful. And if we look at the 4 countries here, United States, most of our coal is coming from the Appalachian area on the East Coast. Russia, China, and India. All right, the downside of coal is that it burns very dirty. You've got this black rock that you are burning, and as you burn it, you get all of this soot and gas, and the gas contains things that we don't want to be breathing. But the upside to coal is that it's easy to mine and it is easy to transport. I could hand you a rock of coal to take home, and then you could burn it in your fireplace for heat. There are 4 types of coal depending on how pure that coal is. The more pure the coal, the more energy is in that coal. So the lowest form of energy is lignite, and then we have subbituminous, bituminous, and the best type of coal is anthracite. Anthracite has the most energy in the rock of the coal itself. We used to mine coal in the United States through tunnels. So you dig down into the side of the mountain. You go 200, 300, 400 feet down into the mountain. And you're in there with a pickaxe, and you're basically hacking away at the wall where the vein of coal is. Then you put it on a little train that takes it out to the surface. As you're down there, you are breathing in all of the coal dust. And so the miners all came up with black lung. So their lungs just stopped functioning after time. You have the danger of mine collapse. Now we're mining like this, open pit mining, where we're just taking the top of the mountain off and making a pit down to where that coal deposit is. It is safer for the workers, worse for the environment. This is energy dense, it's plentiful, it's easy to get. The downside are the impurities that are released into the atmosphere. There are metals like mercury and lead, both which cause nervous system disorders. Petroleum is a liquid mixture of hydrocarbons, water, and sulfur dioxide. Petroleum is your oil in liquid form, or we have natural gas, which is the gases that come off. The difference between coal and oil, coal was plant material, oil was phytoplankton. So it's all of like the no-see-ums that are in the ocean. And you think, well, wait a minute. We're mining or drilling for oil in Yorba Linda, which is nowhere near the ocean. You have to remember that the ocean's covered all the way to the Grand Canyon 5 times in geologic history, which means there are 5 times in geologic history when phytoplankton would have been all over California. That's why we've got good oil deposits here. Liquid petroleum is also called crude oil. Same thing, different name. We turn this crude oil into tar and asphalt. Tar and asphalt is what's making your roads black out there. We turn it into gas for our cars and gas that we can then burn to generate electricity and heat. And we're going to transport it in pipelines and super tankers. What is one of the biggest super tanker uh-ohs that we've had? That one spill, what was the name of the tanker? The Exxon Valdez. You guys need to memorize that because it will come up. So the Exxon Valdez big tanker was bringing oil from Alaska down the coast to the refinery. Where is the biggest pipeline for oil in the United States? What state does it run through? Nope. It's running through Alaska because we are drilling for oil up in Alaska, and we've got the pipeline that brings that oil down through pristine wilderness to the refineries in the lower 48. The problem is not a major problem with the pipeline, not a major crack. It's the small cracks that you have the drip, 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 drip of oil in an ecosystem that does not recover well from disturbance. So not great there. We have 150 oil refineries in the United States. The more we refine the oil, the purer it is. The less impurities, the cleaner it burns. So the more impurities we can take out, the less carbon emissions, the less gas emissions are going to go up in the atmosphere. Our highest producing countries, Saudi Arabia, Russia, US, Iran, China, Canada, and Mexico. Here's where our refineries are in the United States. Where are the majority located? Texas. Why Texas? Cheaper for labor, but it's also the #1 oil producing state in the United States. So it makes sense to refine it where you're drilling for it. Downside to that is what happens for about 3 months out of the year right about this area. Hurricanes. That causes disruptions in oil delivery. California, we have a good amount of refineries. We are #2 for oil production. Our refineries in California, some of those refineries are specific to your gas tank because our gas in California is different than the gas in Texas. Because we have tight tighter environmental regulations, our gas is purified more than the gas in Texas. That's part of the cost. The idea here was to limit the amount of smog that we usually see. Smog is where you can see the air when all of the emissions are there. And we've got two blends, winter blend, summer blend. We talked about that already. Anyone watch the news yesterday or the day before? What happened? There was a big refinery in, I think it was Long Beach, it was off the 405, that had an explosion. Right? To the point where they were telling the people that lived around the refinery, stay indoors, keep your windows closed. There's, no risk to the public, but stay indoors with your windows closed. That's kind of a mixed message. They actually shut down the 405 for a period of time on Tuesday when this explosion happened. What's going to be the outfall to you? Huh? Higher gas prices. So as they get that refinery fixed and back online, we will probably see our gas prices go up a little bit because now we are going to have one less refinery producing gas for our cars. All right, the advantages to liquid petroleum. It is easy to transport and easy to use, but we do have high risks in that transport because it's hard to get oil off of the soil. It's hard to get oil out of the ocean. So if something goes wrong, it tends to go catastrophically wrong. It burns cleaner than coal. There's less impurities. And we can refine it and take even more impurities out. Just as an aside, this is new to AP this year. They want you to know how you are getting your car to move. You put gas in your tank, then there is a little explosions going on in your engine, and those little explosions generate energy that then cause your car to move forward. We have 3 different grades of gas when you go to the pump. 87, 89, and 92. That refers to the amount of impurities in the gas. The higher the number, the fewer the impurities, the cleaner that gas burns. If you drive a normal car, you're fine with 87. If you have like really rich parents that I'm up for adoption, and drive a Ferrari or a Porsche or a Bugatti, you probably need to be at the higher end because your engine's a little more finicky. And so it's not going to like the impurities. In California, our lowest grade is 87. In Utah, their lowest grade I think I ever saw at a pump was 82. Your car is not going to be all that happy on 82, right? You want to be higher up, especially in California where, believe it or not, the car that you buy in California has different emissions on it than a car you buy in Texas. We have a little more technology in our tailpipes. You pay for that when you buy your car because we have to put out less emissions out of the tailpipe. When you bring a car in from another state and you register it here, you have to have it smogged, which means you have to go somewhere and they have to verify that you're not going to pollute the air. If your car doesn't pass smog, you can't register it. So my son's got a friend who they're working on the Jeep down in Otto. His car will never be registered in California because it will never pass the smog limitations in California. They can only register it in Arizona because Arizona doesn't care about emissions as much. They're not as crunchy as us. All right, natural gas is now the gaseous form of phytoplankton. It has another name. So we hear natural gas. You can also hear liquid petroleum gas. When you go buy the tank for your barbecue, or your dad goes and buys the tank for your barbecue, it is usually labeled as LPG. It's the same thing as natural gas. Our most common natural gases are ethanol, or ethane, propane, and butane. If you live out in the desert somewhere or out deep in the canyon because you can't handle being around people, chances are you are not on our electrical grid. which means that you are getting your electricity and your cooking and your heating from LPG. You're going to have a huge tank in your backyard somewhere that is then going to be filled once or twice a year with LPG, with liquid petroleum gas. In the United States, we use liquid petroleum gas to generate electricity and for industrial processes to make fertilizer, vehicle fuel, to cook in your house. 24% of our country is using LPG as a source of energy. Your trash trucks that are driving around in our area are all fueled with methane. Methane is another form of natural gas. It's a new natural gas, which means we are generating it every day. As we've got our landfills, and the landfills are decomposing the trash that we are putting into those landfills, the bacteria is farting, and that bacteria farts methane. And we have pipes that run into our landfills and collect that methane. That methane is now fueling the trash trucks that drive around. Other sources of fossil fuel. In Canada, they have mass oil sand fields. This is oil that is dispersed among sand. Not great for the environment. In order to get to this, they have to clear all of the vegetation off that area, and then they flood the area with water. The oil floats on top of the water, and they can skim that oil off and collect it. Now all of that water is contaminated. You can't use that water for irrigation. You can't use that water to drink. So you've now taken all the vegetation off an area, and you've got contaminated water. But you get oil. Bitumen is tar. Tar is, again, mixed with bacteria, is often mixed with sand. There's a lot of energy in tar, but it's not great for the environment if you harvest it. Anyone who ends up going to UCSB, guys, when you walk on the beach up in Santa Barbara, you end up with tar all over your feet. That's because there's a natural oil seep off the coast. That's why there's also offshore oil drilling in Santa Barbara. But you end up with all of that tar. That tar is the same tar that we're talking about here. It's bitumen. It is great energy dense, but it's hard and environmentally non-friendly to harvest. And then there is our newest entrance into this game, and this is shale oil. This is oil that is literally locked up in rocks. And it is, we think, probably the worst environmentally to harvest, but most of the United States oil is now shale oil. Tomorrow, you guys will be doing a web quest about fracking because it is one of the more controversial ways of getting our energy, and it has not come up as an FRQ yet, which means it is prime to show up. Nuclear energy is our last source of non-renewable energy. It's taking a nuclear reaction, the splitting of a nucleus. When that nucleus splits, it's like a little mini explosion that generates heat, which can be used to boil water, which can be used to create steam, which can be used to turn a turbine.
Entering Indian Point Nuclear Power Plant in Buchanan, New York, we're immediately struck by the huge domes that encase its reactors. We also can't help but notice security.
You can't just stroll on in. Security here, extremely tight. We've just filled out a few forms, given our driver's license, gotten several IDs. They've gone through our vehicles, taken out all of our equipment, inspected it, and now we're ready to head on in to the nuclear reactors.
That is, after 2 briefings and more security checks. Finally, we head to the containment dome of reactor number 3, which is currently offline for refueling.
Right now it's open.
Right now it's open during refueling outage.
It's a little surreal, like walking onto a movie set. But instead of passing wooden props, we pass through a very solid 11-foot thick concrete and steel wall.
This is actually the thickness down here.
This is the wall.
Yellow tape warning of radioactive danger is all that separates us from the white uniformed technicians doing the refueling, replacing the spent fuel rods with new ones. Using a huge crane, they're vertically lifted from the nuclear core and turned horizontal so they can move along a water-filled canal to the adjacent building where the spent fuel rods are kept in a pool to cool down.
If for some reason there were a
All right, so all of this nuclear fuel is found in fuel rods. These fuel rods get really, really hot. You're going to have the control rods between the fuel rods. Those control rods can be raised or lifted depending on how much electricity, how fast you want these reactions to occur. When they can no longer efficiently produce energy, they're called spent fuel rods. At that point, they need to be stored somewhere because they are still highly radioactive. They can still kill you. Believe it or not, they can still be turned into nuclear weapons. So we gotta do something with those things. The biggest question with nuclear power is what do we do with all of this leftover radioactive material? The answer right now for San Onofre, which has been shut down for a few years, is to encase it in concrete at San Onofre. That is a 20-year stopgap. So the concrete barriers will last for 20 years before they break down to the point that they will release radioactive material into the environment. So now we have 20 years to figure out what we're going to do. We used to take all of this stuff out to White Sands in Arizona. It's a mountain, and put it in the middle of the mountain. The problem is no one wants nuclear material transported through their neighborhoods, because if there's an accident, that's not great either, right? The advantage is there is no air pollution produced with this or associated with this, and you can limit your reliance on imported oil. The downside is when accidents happen, like Fukushima, Chernobyl, 3 Mile Island. Lots of people can die. And so that's why we've kind of stopped our reliance on nuclear power in the United States. Fukushima scared us, essentially.
Reactors generating waste in the U.S. alone, the problem is mounting. So what would you do with nuclear?
Kitty litter is the solution and the problem. All right. This is just a review slide for you. 3 major nuclear problems. We have 3 Mile Island, which then said that the resulting legislation, the nuclear power plants aren't responsible for death. Chernobyl in '86, we still don't know how many people died, but it freaked out the rest of the world. And then Fukushima, which freaked out California, and is the main reason why California in the next couple of years will no longer have nuclear reactors. That is all. You guys may put your computers away.